morning, guys. Welcome to Venture Church. I invite you to stand with us and sing at whatever level you feel comfortable.
I'm so glad that you guys have come to Venture Church this morning. It's so great to be here with you all. A few announcements. First of all, if it's your first time joining us, or if you've been coming a couple times checking us out, I would encourage you to fill out a guest card. We have those online, or you can visit Jenny at the Next Step Center at the back of the lobby there and fill out an actual card if you like that too. We just want to get to know you, and there's a little gift for you too. So welcome. Thank you for being here. On November 10, we'll be doing a child dedication celebration, and that is for families who want to just take the next step to commit to raising their kids to know who Jesus is and to kind of partner with the church doing that. So we're going to have a parent meeting after church today, just a quick one right after church, and you'll be meeting with me. So if anyone's interested, I'd say for families with young kids, whatever young means to you is perfectly fine. And then also Venture students are going to be hanging out today from 4 to 6:30 at the Muskegon Luge and Adventure Sports Park. I got it. So bring your friends. You're going to be hiking, rock wall climbing. I think there's going to be pizza and a bonfire, so that'll be a lot of fun. That's for kids in 5th through 12th grade. So I'll gather up and hang out over there. Also, we are going to be having a parents' night out. Woohoo! Right, that's what I was looking for. Okay, so there will be childcare, and that's going to be on November 8 from 6 to 8:30 p.m. So put that in your calendars now, and it will be a fundraiser to send our big kids, to winter camp. So, great. Let's keep going. Thank you, guys.
Now, you heard about it through some of our music, but I want to actually invite you right where you're at this morning, just to have a moment to be still and to be quiet. So I'm actually invite you, if you want, I'm going to give you like 1 minute. I actually want you to close your eyes, and I'm just going to be real quiet, and just going to give you a minute just to think, to pray, to listen to what God might be saying to your heart. Here we go. Keep your eyes closed, just right where you're at. I want you to take a second. Take 3 deep breaths. Well, you can open your eyes. Welcome to Venture Church this morning. I want to begin. I'm actually going to invite you to do something very similar at the end of my message this morning. But I jump in this morning with sort of a preacher's dilemma. And that's that when I stand up here on stage and speak to you, there are lots of things that the Bible teaches us that you want to hear from me and that I want to say to you. You are loved and you're created on purpose and you're chosen and you're built for relationship and there's hope and there's a future for you and all these things. And then there are things in the Bible that sometimes you don't want to hear and I don't really want to say to you. But it's my job and my choice to say we need to hear some of the things like that we're not good enough on our own and that we need a Savior, and sometimes we create the mess that we are in. And the reason that I know that you don't want to hear some of these things is because usually about this time in the service, I look around and a certain percentage of you are getting a nice nap in for the day. I'm like, yeah, I knew it. Checked out. But this morning is not one of those messages. And I just want to give you the good news in that. And that if you're one of those people that right about this time, my voice is a little deep or a little monotone or whatever it is, it's the presence of this place, and you get your best 20-minute nap in of the week. Here's the message for you this morning. You need to take a nap, or at least smell the flowers. We're in this series, Freehand, and we're looking at rules for an authentic life. But the idea is oftentimes we work hard to try to build a life for ourselves, one where we have a life of meaning and significance and purpose and joy and gratitude and all of these different things. But so often we try to freehand that kind of life. We just kind of live on our own whims or our own ideas, or we get on the internet and say, how do I fix this, or how do I do this? And so often it seems like we are just kind of drawing on our own without any guidance. And the good news is that the Bible gives us all of these guidelines, these principles for how to build not the life that we want necessarily, but the life that God has created us to live. The most authentic life is the one where we as created beings are in relationship with our Creator, listening and responding to His voice in our lives. And the big idea for this whole series is that our creativity flows out of our spirituality. That if you want to live an authentic life, if you want to live a life where you are uniquely living into the design that God has given you, that's connected through your relationship with Him. That the more you listen and hear and obey God's voice in your life, that creativity, maybe that's an artistic creativity, but maybe that's a craftsman creativity, or maybe that's a relational creativity or business creativity, that we're all designed to be these creative reflections of God, and our creativity flows out of that relationship with Him. So here's where we're going this morning. We're looking at just this invitation to rest. We're looking at this invitation from God to realize that we don't have to work harder, try more, do more things all the time. Go to the very beginning of the Bible in Genesis chapter 2, And it says this is the account of God creating the world at the very beginning of time. And it says this: by the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Such a unique account of the beginning of creation, because God is all powerful and all knowing and self-sufficient and self-sustaining. God needs nothing from anyone ever throughout all of history. So why did God rest? Why did God rest? Why do we have a God that took a pause from the work of creation? Well, I think in part because in just God's essence, God is more than just what God does. God's more than just the sum of his accomplishments, his desires, his creation. That God is, again, self-sufficient and self-sustaining and good in and of himself. So God was busy at work, but God is also fulfilled in himself as well. But the beauty is that he gave it to us as a model as well. The seventh day, and for 6 days, God created the heavens and the earth, the land and the sea, the birds and the fish and the people and the plants and the animals and all of it. And it says on the seventh day, he gave us this model that we're to rest as well. And he actually says that he set it apart and blessed it in a special way. So the very beginning of creation, if you think about it this way, at the very beginning of time, God created the world perfect. There was no sin. There was no imperfection. God set things in the exact order that he wanted. And he built in nap times. Or he built in a rest day, if you will. That our need for sleep and for rest and to take a break from the work of our hands, it's not a result of our chaotic world. It's actually what God built into the fabric of this world to begin with, that God's design was for you and me to experience rest in our lives. Part of this series flows out of the 10 Commandments that God gave the people of Israel. As Moses came down from Mount Sinai, he shared these commandments with them. And these were supposed to be the guiding principles for these people of Israel as they had fled out of Egypt and slavery, and they were being made into this chosen people of God. And in Exodus chapter 20, it says this in verses 8 to 11. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or your daughter, nor your female or male servant, nor your animals or any foreigners residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. There's good news for you in this. And that's that God designed you. He actually commands you to rest. And some, I don't like being told what to do, whatever. How about take a nap? Take a day off? That's what God has built you for. Can you get along with that commandment, that rule, if you will? What's interesting about the Hebrew calendar and the Jewish tradition is traditionally, throughout most of the world, it's not been a 5-day work week with a 2-day weekend. You guys get like a bonus. We get a bonus one in our culture for the most part. Most people, the way that the society work in a farming kind of economy, stuff like that, is you work 6. You got 1 day off. That 1 day off you spent to worship God, spend time with your family, rest from your work. And because oftentimes we get a couple weekend days off, I think obviously we kind of make a little bit of a mess of this. Because like, okay, which day am I supposed to take off? And then they kind of all blend together, and then you find yourself running around just as busy on the weekend, sometimes more so than you are during the work week, because you find yourself in the hustle and bustle of this world as much as ever before. But what we see throughout the scriptures is God's, not just his encouragement, but his instruction to you to build rest into your life as a regular rhythm and a regular routine. Now, in maybe more traditional kind of cultures, maybe more traditional kind of church settings, there are very strong rules around this. I don't know if you have any Jewish friends. I don't know if you have anybody that worships like that, but oftentimes there's very strong rules about what they do with their Sabbath, which they practice on Saturdays. And Sunday's the beginning of the work week, and they get going. I even remember, I'm not even that old, but I remember when there were parts of West Michigan here where there were laws against like mowing your lawn on Sundays because there was such a strong value on upholding the rules that God had given us. They said, mowing your lawn sounds like work, can't do it. And there's all kinds of ways that this has been adapted throughout history in our world, where some people would say you got to have your Sunday lunch ready on Saturdays so that you're not working, because cooking would be working, or whatever that looks like. The truth is, what Jesus tells us is the Sabbath was given for us, not us for the Sabbath. So we don't need to worship this as if you break one of the rules, a Sunday or something like that, that somehow you're disobeying God. The truth is, God gave us this as a gift to us. So maybe you're busy on Sundays or Saturdays or whatever that looks like. But when's the last time you really paused? You really just sat in silence. Maybe you took some deep breaths. Maybe you took a nap and you really rested. Because I know what it's like to get caught up in the whirlwind of life and the busyness of work. Guess what? When I preach, what I find, the messages that I'm writing, they hit home way more at me than they will at any of you. I feel like God is working and refining things. So guess what's been really hard for me this week? Feels like day in and day out. It's felt like morning to evening, just a constant flow of work. This work with our church, but then work around the house, work with the family. Like, it just feels like I've just been so busy, and it feels like things have just been piling up, and it feels like, okay, Braden, you need to be reminded about this as much or anyone. But God has given us rest for our own good. And so rule number 3 in this series, Freehand, is take a nap, or at least stop to smell the flowers. Just addressing the busyness of our life. And what's really interesting is we think we're living at the fastest pace time in human history, and so did we 10 years ago, and so did we 20 years ago, and every generation thinks they're living at the fastest pace of life in human history, and it's at this accelerating rate of speed where we all realize it's just not sustainable. We can't keep up with everything. We can't stay on the run. We are going to burn out going at the rate that we are. We have to acknowledge that we need a break, that we need a rest. But in our world, we feel so guilty about that. Like, what's the number one response you hear from your friends, your coworkers, your neighbors when you say, "How are you doing?" What's the number response? I'm busy. I'm busy. It's become such a common part of our vernacular, our world, that we almost say we're busy as a way to kind of like prove our worth to people. So you see, I'm busy too. I hate telling people I'm busy. When I tell people I'm busy, I'm like, and I wish I weren't. I know that that's not the right way for me to be living, is busy. In fact, I would like to live at the pace of God, if you would. Think about Jesus. He was full of wisdom and power and might, and people flocked to him. Anyway, I was talking about this with a couple weekends ago, and yet Jesus, in the midst of this terrifying storm out on a lake, he's sailing with his friends. He's taking a nap, and his friends think they're going to die, and he's like, "What are you worried about?" Don't you know who's in charge? And he proved that he was in charge by calming the storm around them. But so often we live at this pace where we are just like his friends in that boat, that we're frantic. We're just kind of running around wondering if we're going to make it. If you could have been a fly on the wall in a conversation in my own home last night. Because so often it feels like if I don't work harder, do more, it's all going to fall apart. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, one of the wisdom texts, kind of tells us how to build a life for ourselves. It says, better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. You're like, what the heck is that about, Braden? We work hard. Okay, it doesn't say what's in the hand, but let's just pretend it's cash. A handful of cash. Would you rather have that handful of cash with peace in your life? Or would you rather have two handfuls, but with chaos? And most people are like, well, what bills are it? Is it ones, tens, 20s, whatever it is? Enough to live on? Thanks, Scott. We're getting interactive this morning. Scott, you've never been anything if not honest. I appreciate that. The point is, the scriptures tell us it's so much better to live at peace than to continue running and chasing after the gain. And Scott, the good news is, the promise is you'll get some. But chasing after more is where we end up in strife and toil and burnout and exhaustion in the midst of our lives. Psalm 127 says, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves. You can have whatever plans, whatever schedule you want. You can work harder. You can try more. But unless God is the one looking over it, it's all in vain. And it says God grants sleep to those he loves. God invites you to experience his peace and his rest. It's not just about doing more, being busier, trying harder. And what we see about rest is it's an invitation to allow God to provide us what we need. I'm not a farmer, but I'm a farmer adjacent, meaning I've got an uncle that's a very successful farmer. I've learned some principles about farming over life. But what's really interesting about farmland and the way that farming works is if you just keep planting the same thing and fertilizing it and growing it and planting and fertilizing, growing and going over and over and over again, eventually dirt gets tired. And it becomes less and less productive. And it needs a time to rest and nutrients to be rebuilt. There's this kind of growing trend of regenerative agriculture in our world. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but the idea that we rotate things through and we allow the land to rest so that it can provide better, more nutritious things in the world. Some would just call this old school farming. But our big commercial agricultural operations, they kind of strip the land of all its nutrients, and then it sits and you kind of say, what is there to do with this dirt that is run out of the things that make food the best food that we can get? I just think that's interesting in our world, that dirt itself, like the most basic thing in the world, something we spend absolutely no time in our life thinking about, can get tired. And the beauty of the scriptures is God knew what he was doing. And he actually builds this into this farming society that were the early Israelites. And he said, every seventh year, you need to let your land rest. It was actually forbidden to grow crops. The 7th year you are on a piece of land. Because God in his wisdom understood what maybe those people originally only understood through his instruction, but now we have the science behind why we need to let soil rest. Because we need to let nature run its course and compost things and restore things and invest those nutrients back in the soil. It's what's best for the soil. It's what's best for the food. It's what's best for us. Now, the promise from Scripture is you came from dust and to dust you'll return. But sitting here now, I think you realize you are a little bit more complex and unique than dirt. Don't look at your neighbor. That wouldn't be nice. So if dirt in its basic and most elemental form needs an opportunity to rest, what about you? This incredible, creative machine, animal with a soul thing. Like, there's so much complexity in the human body. We have no idea even how all this comes together. The scientists study the eyeball itself and say, this is more than we can possibly understand, how light and photons become these processes that happen in our brains, and we understand all of these things. And we're searching for the answers to human existence, and we have no understanding. We know how computers work. We have no understanding of human consciousness. Like, you're there, and you're breathing, and you're thinking, and part of it is a biological process, but we don't know why you're different than me and all of these things. And God's promise to us when we take a moment to acknowledge that he is who he is, that we're more than dirt, that we need rest and we need to be restored ourselves. Jeremiah 31:25 says, I will refresh the weary and satisfy the faint. God built rest into the beginning of the story in Genesis. It wasn't because of the brokenness of the world. It was because of God's design for us. But now that we live in a world full of sin and disease and brokenness, we need that rest more so than ever. Our prayer for you this morning, you might be here this morning, and you might just say, I'm just exhausted. I'm so tired. But I don't even know how to get off the hamster wheel of just life and chaos and busyness. The invitation is to trust God to lead you into that place of rest. Isaiah chapter 40 says this in verses 29 to 31. It says, he gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. We go through life and we take our lumps along the way, and so often we find ourselves tired and weary and wondering how we're going to get through the next day, the next week, the next months. Work oftentimes weighs us down. Relationships sometimes weigh us down. We get health diagnoses that weigh us down. There's so much. And if we just look at our circumstances, we just don't have the answers. I mean, that's the reality, that you aren't wise enough, smart enough, strong enough to fix every challenge that's right in front of you on your own. And Jesus knew this. Jesus knew that God has designed us not just for work and toil and strife, but relationship with himself first and foremost. And Jesus points us all the way back to the beginning of Genesis. In Matthew chapter 11, this is just an invitation from Jesus. In verses 28 to 30, it says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Jesus looks at what we're experiencing in our own lives. Says, I wouldn't expect anything else. That you go through this life, that you live your years, you experience the heartache of this life, and that you might feel weary, burdened. He says that's not the way it's supposed to be. That's not the way that it was ever designed to be. That is a result of our fallen and our broken world where sin twists and entangles every single one of us on our relationships and our work and how we find our way through this life. But Jesus just goes back to another farming metaphor. He said, hey, if you would come to me, if you would follow my ways, if you would let my voice lead you, you would find the true rest that God has planned for you. And that's not just rest from work or rest from the busyness of life, but that's the rest that says, I am fully satisfied in God himself. A yoke was something that you used to put on oxen, to get two oxen to work together. I don't know if you've ever met an ox or ever been around an ox. I haven't in my life, but what I understand about oxes, they're very strong and very stubborn. They're good workers, but it's hard to get them to do what you're trying to tell them to do. They want to kind of go their own way, do their own thing. Again, don't elbow the person next to you. That's just not nice. But what they would do in times of old, they would take these beasts of burden that they realized their capacity to get work done, and they build this yoke, and they would put one on one side and another ox on another side, and they would have them plow together. And through the yoke, they could kind of control their direction, and they could share the load, and they could work in the same direction together. And so Jesus says, hey, would you take my yoke? And some of us are like, well, I'm kind of stubborn. I don't really like being told what to do. And Jesus says, yeah, I've noticed. How's it working out for you? And then Jesus said, if you would take one half of the yoke, I've got the other half, and if you would go with me, you would find that my yoke isn't a burden to you. It's not ruining your life. In fact, I will lead you to the place you've always needed to be. That if you would listen to my voice, if you would obey my commands, if you would live according to my ways, you would find a life of joy and satisfaction that is what this world is longing to find, but is so unique in our world today. People that can step away from the busyness and the chaos of this life and live at peace and contentment and experience joy unlike anything else this world has to offer. That really, when it comes to this invitation to rest, it's an invitation to Jesus himself. Because our temptation, our world tells us, try harder, do more, be busier. And Jesus says, no. Follow me. Follow my ways. Follow my life. And you will find what it is that you've been longing for. Jesus invites us to himself. Full stop. He invites us to take naps. He invites us to take days off. He invites us in the midst of our lives to stop and smell the flowers, if you will. Because I think that the rule that I want you to hear is that we can't just live at a non-stop pace. You've been created for rest, and you've been created to enjoy and be satisfied in God himself, but also this world that he's created. And if you are living at a pace where you don't have time to take it in, to look around, to smell the flowers, It's time for a break. It's time to slow down. It's time to reevaluate some things in your own life. I'll be honest, this has been the very busiest season of work I've ever experienced in my life. More responsibilities, more people to communicate with. And I'm so tempted to just think I can try harder, do more, and that will fix all of the things that are in front of me. And yet last weekend, even though I was invited to do more, if you will, there were more projects that needed to be get done. I sort of just took stock on what was happening in my life and my family's life and just like, I think we just need to breathe. So we all woke up late. We started the day with a board game. I don't know if that was good or not because some fists were almost flying by the end of that game. One of my daughters won. I'm not very happy about that because I don't like losing. But then we went for a long family bike ride, and we ended the night with a movie night, kind of cuddled up on the couch. And I can tell you that I know my soul needed that. I know my family needed that. There was way more to be done. There were all kinds of projects that I left unchecked on the task list because we took a day. But I needed to be reminded that my life is more than just the accomplishments, than my production. That the best thing I can do with my life is love my family as well as I can. And that actually out of that ability to rest, I have clearer thoughts. I have more production in my own life. And that's just one example in my own life. I need to take a pause. I need to practice Sabbath, if you will. And so here's what I just want to invite you to kind of think through in your own life. In the Old Testament of the Bible, the whole society was actually built around the Sabbath day. You worked 6 days a week so that you could get to that seventh day of rest, that one that talks about God making holy and set apart. Businesses weren't open. People weren't running around. They were practicing the Sabbath. And it has, for the most part, been true of the Christian church as well. That this has been a high priority and a high value in our world, that on Sundays we would celebrate the resurrection of Jesus and that we would rest from our work. I know what our world looks like right now, and I know that Saturdays are busy running around, and some of you are working Saturdays, managing kids' schedules, all of those things on Saturdays. So you run into Sunday and you feel like you got to get ready for the rest of the week. I'm not going to be your accountability partner on this, but I would challenge you to actually practice a Sabbath every day. Or every day. That's not what I meant to say. Every week. You practice Sabbath every day, you get lazy and unproductive. There's a lot of teaching about not resting too much as well. But mark it out. Mark it out in your own life or with your family or maybe with a group of friends and say, hey, we're just going to attempt to avoid working Sundays, Saturdays. We're going to try to trust that if one day a week we step aside from the projects and the busyness, that God will bless and provide as we need. When you practice this, it's a way of you trusting God to be who he is. Saying everything in my life doesn't depend on my productivity, my busyness. Maybe you need to actually reevaluate your own schedule and say, I've let so many things slip in. I don't know the last time I really just practiced a day without work. Maybe think about making this a habit in your own life. I get myself into trouble with this because we, as a family, we've put some pretty rigid boundaries up about Sundays. Now, I'm working on Sundays, but that doesn't mean my family doesn't need to be. But there are certain things that our kids could be involved in on Sundays. We're like, nope. If we're as a family, we want to be worshiping together on Sundays and then spending the day together as we can. And we sacrifice, but guess what? God is providing and leading. We trust him in the midst of some of those things. One of the ways that you're going to have to make this happen is you might have to quit something. If you're a people pleaser, this is like the worst news you could ever hear in your life. What if I quit? I'm going to make people disappointed or I don't show up. You might just need to look at the things that are consuming your time, and you might need to quit something in your own life. Some are like, yeah, this Sunday thing, 10 a.m., nah. I mean, but what are the things in your own life? Maybe you're working too much. Maybe you're involved in too many activities. Maybe you've let your kids set the pace in your family's life and say, hey, I love you. We just don't have time for that. Maybe there's something that you need to quit in your own life and take a break from to make room to enjoy this rest that God invites you to. Or, and this is the best news for some of you, maybe you just need to take a nap. Maybe you need to allow yourself to take a nap. Maybe today or throughout the week when you're hitting that point in your life where you realize you're burnt out and that you're weary. Take a nap. Let God refresh your soul. Take a day off. Be restored in the midst of all of that. We look at the very beginning of the scriptures. Rest is built into God's design for us, for our lives. That he wants you to rest from your work, but he wants you to rest in himself more than anything. Jesus understands your life and the challenges and the burdens you face, and his invitation is to himself. He said, if you would follow my ways, if you would let me lead, you're going to find yourself refreshed. When we get together on Sundays, one of the things we hope is that an hour together, hour and a half together on Sunday mornings is a way that God refreshes our souls as we are reminded who he is and what he's done. That we're not just the sum total of our activities. That we're created on purpose for purpose. And that our soul connected to God in relationship is where our creativity flows out of. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes again this morning. And right where you're at, I'm going to give you another few seconds of silence to listen. Something might be on your heart or your mind that God is prompting you to change in your own life. Maybe you just talk to God about that in the quietness of your own heart, right where you're at. Or maybe the truth is that you've avoided trusting Jesus with these things, and the invitation is just to take his yoke on yourself for the first time in your life and say, God, I've been trying this on my own. It's not working. Jesus, I want to trust you. I want to follow you with my life. I'm going to give you 1 minute, just quietness right where you're at. God, we've gotten so used to the noise in our lives that the quiet is unsettling. Because for so many of us, without our busyness, we don't know who we are. That our first response when somebody asks how we're doing is we say, busy. And yet we see that Jesus, with the responsibility for the fate of human history in his hands, he lived at an unhurried pace. That he enjoyed walks through the countryside. That he took naps. That he was unburdened by so many of the things that distract us and pull us away from you. And God, we want to see that you have created us for rest. And we're not just supposed to go at light speed all the time, running and being productive. That we want to be the kind of people that carve out time to take naps, or when we're on the adventure, to stop and smell the flowers, to enjoy the created world that you've given us, because you've created us for more than just production. We're more than just robots or machines. We're created to be expressions of you. And we're grateful that at the beginning you rested, because you're a God that's created rest as a gift for us. Would you give us the courage to press pause on some of the demands of life, to take a day off, to trust you, to acknowledge that we need you more than we need our own productivity, God. We love you and we thank you for the hope of Jesus. Amen.
We're going to continue with a couple of songs. I invite you to stand with us. song that we brought back from the old days, so hope you enjoy. There's a rock that doesn't move. It hasn't moved, it'll never move, even though the waves come crashing down. There's a tower on a hill. It's always strong, it will never shake. It was standing there before the world began. There's a wave that's coming in, washing over this town. It will make or break us, reinvent us. It's time to let me down. On Christ's solid rock we will stand. All of the ground is sinking sand. On Christ's solid rock we will stand. We'll climb on your back, take us to higher ground. There's a song that doesn't fade, it'll never fade, it was custom made, raise the sons and daughters of this earth. There's a sound that's coming in, rushing over this town. It will make or break us, reinvent us. Time to lay me down. On Christ's solid rock we will stand. And all of the ground is sinking sand. On Christ's solid rock we will stand. We'll climb on your back, take us to higher ground.
My hope was built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not end the sweetest frame, but wholly trust